Her mother left when she was 11. They spent 50 years trying to find each other. Her mother left on a Tuesday. No warning. No conversation the night before. No suitcase sitting by the front door that a child might notice and ask about. One morning, Zelma Bullock was there, making breakfast, moving through the kitchen, occupying the particular space that mothers occupy in a child's understanding of the world. And then she wasn't. Anna Mae Bullock was 11 years old. 11. The age when you still believe with your whole body that the people who are supposed to stay will stay. The age before you learn that love and leaving can exist in the same person at the same time, without contradiction. Zelma had her reasons. Her husband Floyd was a hard man, difficult in the ways that men in that era were permitted to be difficult, with very little to stop them. The American South in 1950 did not offer women many exits. Zelma found one. She packed what she needed, got on a bus to St. Louis, and started over. She left Anna Mae. She left her sister Aline. She left them with their grandmother, Georgiana Curry, in Brownsville, Tennessee. 2 years later, Floyd married someone else and moved to Detroit. Anna Mae was 11 when her mother left. She was 13 when her father disappeared too. By the time she was a teenager, by the time most children are just beginning to understand who they are, she had already been left by both people whose job it was to stay. She would carry that for the rest of her life. Not loudly, not as something she performed, as a quiet, bedrock fact that shaped everything. Every stage she ever stood on, every name she ever claimed, every time she chose to stay when staying cost her everything. Nutbush, Tennessee in the 1950s was not a place that offered much to a girl without parents. It was a small, rural community, flat farmland, church on Sunday, cotton fields that stretched to the edge of everything you could see. Anna Mae sang in the church choir at Spring Hill Baptist Church. She was, by every account, extraordinary even then. A voice too large for the building it was in, a presence that made adults stop in the middle of whatever they were doing and pay attention. Her grandmother Georgiana did what grandmothers do when the parents disappear. She held things together with the particular quiet competence of a woman who has seen hard things before and knows that children need stability more than they need explanations. Anna Mae did not receive much in the way of explanations. Not about why her mother left. Not about what she had done, if anything. Not about when or whether things would change. She just woke up one day and her mother was in St. Louis and her father was in Detroit, and she was in Nutbush with her grandmother and a voice that had nowhere to go. She said later, in the autobiography she wrote at 47 years old, when she finally had the distance to look back clearly, "I felt my parents did not love me. I was not wanted." 7 words, the most ordinary words in the language, and also, perhaps, the heaviest thing she ever said out loud. The first reunion came at a funeral. Georgiana Curry, the grandmother who had raised Anna Mae after everyone else was gone, died in 1956. Anna Mae was 16 years old. Zelma came back to Tennessee for the funeral. Not for Anna Mae exactly, for her own mother. Because even women who leave come back for their mothers. But she was there, and Anna Mae was there, and the particular compressed grief of a southern funeral in a small town, the casseroles, the church, the people who haven't seen each other in 5 years pretending they have, created a space, briefly, for a mother and a daughter to be in the same room. Zelma made an offer. "Come to St. Louis with me," she said. "I'll give you a new life, a real city, a real school, a chance at something bigger than Nutbush can offer." Anna Mae went. Of course she went. She was 16 years old. She had been left by her mother at 11. She had spent 5 years in the care of a grandmother who was now in the ground, and her mother, her actual mother, the woman whose face was the first face she had ever known, had appeared and said, "Come with me." You would have gone too. St. Louis did not turn out to be the fresh start either of them had imagined. The house was small. The dynamic between them was immediately and consistently difficult. Not violent, not dramatic, just tight. Like two people who had grown into their shapes in each other's absence and now couldn't quite fit in the same space. Anime was becoming someone. She could feel it happening. The particular momentum of a person who has found what they're supposed to do with their life. She was going to clubs. She was listening to Ike Turner's band. She was singing wherever anyone would let her. She was becoming, piece by piece, the thing she would eventually be. And Zelma looked at all of this and saw a girl who could sing and dance. That was it. That was the full measure of what her mother saw. Not talent, not drive, not the particular volcanic force that would eventually fill Wembley Stadium. Just a girl who could sing and dance. She wasn't kind, Tina said years later, choosing her words with the precision of someone who has had decades to decide exactly what's true. She didn't like me. I think she just didn't know what to do with a girl like me. It is a sentence that contains so much. Not hatred, not cruelty. Just a fundamental incompatibility between a woman who had survived by making herself smaller and a daughter who was constitutionally incapable of being small. The years moved forward. Anime became Tina Turner. The stage, the name, the voice. The Ike and Tina Turner Review. The records, the tours, the recognition that came slowly at first and then all at once. And here is the detail that stays with you long after you've heard this story. When Tina Turner became famous, genuinely, undeniably, world historically famous, her mother could not quite accept that her daughter had done it. She described it in an interview with a kind of rueful, clear-eyed humor that only comes from having processed something for a very long time. Even after I became Tina, Ma was still a little bit like, "Who did that? And who did this?" And I said, "I did that, Mom." And she would say, "No, I don't believe it." When Tina was with Ike, Zelma gave the credit to Ike. Ike must have arranged it. Ike made it happen. When the solo career exploded, private dancer, the Grammys, Wembley, Rio, 4 Grammy Awards in one night, the largest solo concert audience in history, Zelma gave the credit to Roger Davies, her manager. He must have known the right people. He must have opened the right doors. Never Tina. Not once, cleanly, directly. "You did this. You made this. This is yours." She didn't see that I had any creativity, Tina said. She just saw that I could sing and dance. And that's all. That was Ma's mentality. Think about what it means to be one of the most celebrated artists in the history of popular music, and to have your mother say essentially, "Yes, but who really did it?" It is perhaps the oldest wound there is, the one that doesn't close no matter how many stadiums you fill. The one that sits in a particular place that no Grammy can reach. There was a trip to South France. Tina was on tour. Zelma came to visit. Aline was there too, the 3 of them, in the south of France, which was about as far from Nutbush, Tennessee as it was possible to get. One morning at breakfast, something happened. Zelma and Aline got into an argument. The kind of low-level family argument that has 15 years of unspoken things packed inside a single morning at a hotel table. Tina watched from across the table. And then she said something she had probably wanted to say for a very long time. She told her mother, calmly, directly, without raising her voice, that she didn't think the Bible Zelma kept quoting was actually helping anyone in the room. Zelma was furious. She went silent in the particular way that women of her generation went silent. Not the silence of acceptance, but the silence of a decision. She came to breakfast the next morning with her hair undone, deliberately. A woman who always presented herself with care and dignity, who had never in her adult life sat down to a meal looking like she hadn't tried, came to breakfast with her hair undone. It was a statement, a withholding of herself, a visible declaration: you have upset me, and you will know it. Tina noticed. She had been reading her mother her entire life, learning the language of her moods, her silences, her particular forms of punishment. She understood. She let it go, because that is what Tina Turner did. She had been letting things go since she was 11 years old.
Zelma Priscilla Bullock died in October 1999. She was 81 years old. Tina Turner was 60. By then, she had been on stages on every continent. She had won 8 Grammys. She had sold over 200 million records. She had survived Ike Turner. She had found Erwin Bach. She had built a life in Switzerland that was, in almost every way, the opposite of Nutbush. Quiet, chosen, loved. And her mother had died without ever quite saying, "I see what you did. I know it was you." Tina Turner said, in the measured way she said the most important things, the way you speak when you have spent decades making peace with something that cannot be undone, that the last time she spoke to her mother, they were on good terms. On good terms. 6 words. Not, "We finally found what we'd been looking for." Not, "She told me she was proud." Not, "We said everything that needed to be said before the door closed." Just, on good terms. For a woman who had been left at 11, who had spent her entire life reaching toward something her mother had never quite given her, on good terms was perhaps the most honest ending there was. She took it. She took it the way she had taken everything life had handed her, with clear eyes, without sentimentality, without pretending it was more than what it was. A woman left Tennessee in 1950 to save her own life. In doing so, she shaped a girl who would spend the rest of hers proving she didn't need saving. A mother and a daughter. 50 years. 2 women who never found the exact right words, but who, at the very end, were on good terms. Sometimes that has to be enough. And sometimes, if you are Tina Turner, if you have learned to build something out of every absence, every leaving, every door that closed before you were ready, sometimes it is. Subscribe to Tina Turner Untold. Every day we find the stories behind the legend, the quiet ones, the painful ones, the ones she carried all the way to the end. New story, every day.